Chapter 10. The decision. You are listening at novelfull.audio. After saying this, Minos left the room and went to the home of the other student, Allison. She lived 10 minutes from the academy with her family. While Minos was leaving, director Lionel tried to convince those responsible for Lee and Ralph not to accept the young Stewart's offer. Rylon, GRYFF, the decision is up to you. Our Gill family would never force anyone to join us. But honestly, I don't see how this brat can be better than us for your families. If he has so much wealth to offer a black-grade cultivation technique, then what is he doing here? Honestly, I know a little about that boy's past. Although his father was a spiritual king, he was still a subordinate to the royal family. And as far as I know, these subordinates only receive 2 black-grade techniques, which are not normally specialized in cultivation. So, if he has the 2 techniques that his father left behind and a cultivation technique, all of them black-grade, then why not sell one of these techniques and continue to grow stronger in a region rich in spiritual energy? Why waste his time at this place? Not to mention that he has no past here in the Black Plain. I don't know what he wants to do, but I think it's too risky. I advise you not to hear that boy's words. Lionel said everything he thought and knew in an attempt to prevent his family from losing those 2 boys. Despite being a developing family in the central region of the Brown Kingdom, the Gill family was not yet as the great noble families in the capital. So, they needed talented members from outside the family to keep its growing. They had then started to build and partner with spiritual academies in poorer places in an attempt to get new members for their family. However, they would not force the situation if someone changed their minds and returned the investment. Of course, only for those who haven't yet entered the family and haven't received their techniques. Otherwise, it would be impossible. They talked for a few more minutes and then left. Of the 2, although neither was confident in Minos, GRYFF was still very curious about the young man's complete offer. Rylon, on the other hand, was convinced it wouldn't be worth it to stay in this place. He didn't even want to know what kind of beautiful words Minos could say to him. Minos and his 2 guards finally arrived in front of a small house after walking for a few minutes. It was a house with only the first floor, it was completely blue and had only 1 window on the side of the street. But it looked well cared for, giving the impression that the owners struggled to maintain a certain quality. The young ruler then knocked on the front door. Pa pa pa. Then, a girl who looked about 10 years old, with black hair tied in a ponytail, opened the door and screamed. "Mom, we have a visitor." It wasn't long before a middle-aged woman came running to the door. She had a beauty that could be considered good in a well-developed body, black hair, and a gentle look. She then replied, "May I know the reason for your visit?" Minos then replied with a smile on his face. "Nice to meet you, Mrs. Tasia. I'm Minos Stewart. I'm here to talk about the future of your daughter, Allison. I believe that Mia had communicated about this before." "Ah. So, it's the young Master Stewart. Please come in. My husband is in the room. We can talk about it there." She replied with a smile on her face. Soon after, Minos met Pollo, Tasia's husband, and Allison's father. He was a tall man, who looked to be in his 40s, and he didn't even have a hair on his head. Thought it wasn't long before they started arguing about the main subject. Pollo then asked, "So, young man, why should I risk my daughter's future by making her stay here?" Minos then started to put all his cards on the table. "Well, before I came here, it would be stupid to throw away the chance to go to a better place. But now it's different. I made it possible to cultivate the lands of the Black Plain, which you will be able to see with your own eyes in less than a month when the plants are big enough for everyone in the city to notice the change, as well as the spiritual energy of the Black Plain, will begin to increase in 10 years. Thus, I have already solved the 2 main problems in the region. It's only a matter of time before the region develops." Minos then continued. But this point is not the main point. As long as your daughter is accepted by a noble family, she will become a subordinate and will receive resources. You may not know this, but my father was a subordinate to the Brown Kingdom royal family, which is the most well-developed family in this realm. However, in this family, subordinates like my father would receive at most 2 black-grade techniques, which could not be a cultivation technique. They do this to maintain a higher cultivation speed among the original members of the family. And these techniques can also only be acquired after many years of service. In addition, it also provides a salary equivalent to their cultivation stage, which ranges from 20 low-grade crystals to 10 medium-grade crystals per month, respectively for body foundation and spiritual king. And they don't give anything to their subordinates' family. Then Minos looked seriously at the man and woman in front of him and said, I offer a black-grade technique that specializes in cultivation at the moment she reaches the age to start cultivating. I also guarantee that all the techniques she will receive are, at least, black-grade. And depending on the services she can provide, there is a possibility that she will be rewarded with a higher degree. I will also offer a payment ranging from 50 low-grade spiritual crystals to 50 medium-grade crystals per month, if she reaches the level of a spiritual king, or higher than that, depending on the stage of cultivation she is in. And there are possibilities that the two of you could also be helped in the future. Depending on your daughter's performance, I may even be able to help you reach level 69 during your lives. But I can't help you getting past that, as someone with blue talent can reach this level at most, using special means. In this world, blue talent meant that if someone had the time, then reaching level 29 was a certainty. From there, that person would have more than 50% to move on to the next step. Within the stages, there were no bottlenecks, so a person who reached a certain stage could reach the peak of it if they continued to cultivate. For reaches the 5th stage, the chances were less than 20%, if there was no help from special pills or medicines. And from there, it would be necessary for special resources to be used. But there was also a limit. To get an idea, with the talents white, blue, black, silver, and golden, with special items someone could reach the stages, respectively, 5th, 7th, 9th, and 11th. After finishing speaking, Minos then waited for Allison's parents to respond. This. Do you really have the ability to do these things? I believe that not even King Brown could promise that. Pollo said with an incomprehensible face. After that, Minos showed him a silver scroll. It was an attack technique classified in silver-grade. After seeing this, Pollo was incredibly amazed. This young man could take out a legendary technique like that. It was like he was showing something very ordinary. Although Pollo has never seen techniques so well classified, in this world, anyone would know the degree of a technique just by looking at it once. This is because the techniques kept a certain spirituality within it. After returning the scroll to Minos, Pollo and his family were determined that this young man could definitely do the things he promised. It was not long before they agreed to let their daughter join Minos' forces. Soon after, Minos told them to take their daughter to the mansion as soon as she turns 10, which would happen in the next few weeks. Minos then returned to his home after saying goodbye. And so, an entire week went by. Minos had trained as hard as he could on those days, reaching level 8. In this period, the 3 hectares were prepared, and the crops were already growing in the soil. Today, Minos finally received a visit from GRYFF, the responsible for Lee. GRYFF was very curious to know what Minos' offer would be, and depending on how good it was, Lee could also end up joining the forces of the young Stuart. Chapter 11. The Black Plain Army. You are listening at NovelFull.audio. Minos received GRYFF into his office with a smile on his face. In fact, he already expected this person to come to know the exact nature of the offer since he had shown a smarter behavior when he met him. As for Ralph's father, there was no chance of him coming here due to his behavior. He was a rash person who could not see the general situation before making his mistakes. Minos then sat in his chair and indicated to GRYFF. Sit here, let's talk. To the point, I know you want to know what I have to offer to your brother, which the Gill family cannot. So, here's the thing. After some time speaking, Minos told Gryff exactly what he had said to Allison's family. From cultivation techniques to the salary that the young Lee would receive. Minos also promised to welcome Gryff and Lee's younger sister, Ayn, when she was 10 years old. He could also help Gryff to reach level 69, as well as Allison's parents. After hearing all of this, Gryff also couldn't believe it all, just like Poyo, but when he saw the silver grade technique, he didn't suspect Minos anymore. Finally, they came to an agreement, and young Lee would come to the mansion as soon as he was 10 years old. After resolving this issue, Minos wanted to start doing something about the future Black Plain Army. First, he would merge the Dry City Guard and his personal team. So, he wanted to record the strength levels of each individual and then create a new hierarchy. It would take into account the level and the potential of each member of the army. Minos then met with Commander Pike and Butler Dillion to begin to resolve this matter. You already know that I want to start the Black Plain Army. So, to start, I want to know what our strength is. Grandpa Dillion, what is the level of my personal guards? Minos said directly without rolling. Of the 10 guards, 1 is at level 33, 1 at 34, 3 at 35, 2 at 36, 1 at 37, and 2 at 38. They all have blue talent. And yours? Minos asked as he looked at Commander Pike. There are 30 men counting on me, 9 are at level 27, 6 at 28, 5 at 29, 3 at 31, 4 at 32, 1 at 33, 1 at 34, and 1 at 35. They all have blue talent. Said Pike. It's not too bad for a start. After that, Minos decided that he would establish the army in 6 months. At that time, the hierarchy would follow the order: Student LV 0.9, Recruit LV 10.19, Soldier LV 20.29, Corporal LV 30.39, Sergeant LV 40.49, Lieutenant LV 50.59, Captain LV 60.69, Major LV 70.79, Colonel LV 80.89 and General LV 90.99. Each position would have a salary equivalent to its level, with one student earning 50 low-grade spiritual crystals and generals, 800 high-grade crystals. There would also be a minimum length of service in each position to reach the next, 6 months to become a recruit and 25 years to become a general from a colonel's position. After hearing the hierarchy that Minos wanted to follow, both Dillion and Pike had their faces completely white. The young man in front of them was already thinking of having demigods in his ranks, while they would already find it very much to have spiritual emperors. But Minos didn't care about their reaction. It was just a matter of time for him. In 30 years, when the spiritual root is completely recovered, and this region has a high density of spiritual energy, there will certainly already be some spiritual emperors living here. Anyway, in 6 months, I want all this change to be made. I also want to build a headquarters for the army. Once we have the first profit from the current crop, it must be done. In no more than a year, I want to be able to increase the number of members of our forces. As for the current members, we are going to invest in low-level spiritual pills and medicines to help them increase their strength. The spiritual pills in question were compounds formed from the fusion of different ingredients, which could be medicines, the blood of beasts, bones, etc. The pills could preserve and even increase the total spirituality contained in the ingredients and were used in a variety of ways, from curing diseases to even increasing the cultivation of those who use them. They were prepared by alchemists, who were cultivators specialized in the production of these compounds. Like spiritual blacksmiths and array masters, they focused on techniques focused on their main activity. After hearing this, Pike was overjoyed. Life would improve considerably for the Black Plain. And he was very excited to be able to participate in all of this. Grandpa Dillion, don't forget to look for information about alchemists too. We have to prepare well to proceed in the best possible way. Minas said with a smile on his face. He was also very pleased with how things were going. He had woken up a little less than 3 weeks ago, but he was already doing so many things. I should get the basics on array masters and blacksmiths nearby in the next few days. I will try to bring all the information as soon as possible, said the middle-aged man calmly. After some more conversation, Dillion and Pike left Minas alone in his office. A moment later, Mia entered the room. Young Master Minas, I have already counted the average consumption data for corn, rice, and wheat, she said with a smile on her face. Oh. And then? In the previous year, the consumption of those crops was 300, 150, and 200 tons per month, respectively. According to the current projection of planting on the 3 hectares that have been modified, then we could reach less than 2% of the domestic market for these 3 items. I went ahead and discovered that there is also a great demand for spiritual fruits in the city. So, it could be another type of plantation that could generate profits in the future. Thanks for the service of Mia, he replied with satisfaction. After finishing the day's affairs, Minas returned to the spatial kingdom to cultivate. He was getting closer to level 9, and in a week at most, he would finally reach level 10, the transition stage. When stepping up, some important things would happen to the cultivator. First, there would be a change in the fleshy body, which would qualitatively change all the cells in the body, releasing impurities and increasing the average vitality of the individual. The body would also have an energy that would be equivalent to 10% of the spiritual energy that a cultivator would have at the initial level of that stage. For example, on becoming a spiritual king, the cultivator's body would undergo a complete transformation, that even if he had his cultivation crippled, only with the strength of the physique would he be able to defeat a level 35 individual who was using all of his cultivation. This also meant that even if someone had their cultivation crippled, their vitality would remain the same as before, since this characteristic is exclusively related to the person's body. However, this would only happen from the spiritual beginner stage due to the amount of spiritual energy being very low before this point. From the body foundation to the transition stage, there would only be an increase in vitality. And Minas could also add another technique in this new stage. Meanwhile, in a hotel in the Dry City, a young blonde woman was drinking her tea on her porch. This was Elin Nash, a Stone Island merchant. She had been in town for more than a week to see if the rumor that the new local sovereign cured the Black Plague was really true. In these last days, she sent her guard, Edouard, to check the place where about 200 people were working to see if there would be any changes. Some time passed, and the guard returned with a smile on his face. He then said, "As expected from Mrs. Elin, you got it right again. The Black Plague appears to have been cured, at least the region where those farmers are working no longer has the old problem. It looks like arable lands, like many others I have seen." As expected. Well, now we must try to meet this Minas. This city needs many things that Stone Island has to sell. She then smiled as if she had found a treasure chest. After that, she asked a servant at the hotel she was in to schedule a time, so she could meet Minas and then do business. If she could support the Black Plague now, then she could have an important position in this place in the future. Chapter 12. The Stone Island Merchant. You are listening at NovelFull.audio. 2 days passed, and Minas had already reached level 9, and he was preparing to reach the next stage today. But before that, he would have a somewhat unusual meeting today. Despite being the local sovereign, Minas had not yet found any local traders because the local governor generally would not have much to negotiate, being only a regulator for a few activities. But today, a Stone Island merchant would meet with him. Minas was excited about this, as there was only one possibility for such a thing to happen, that she knew that he had solved the Black Plague problem. The young steward was waiting in his office, along with butler Dillion, when someone knocked on the door and then came in. It was Mia. "Young master, Miss Elin Nash is here to see you." tell her to come in. I was already waiting for her. Minos spoke with a satisfied expression. After that, a young blonde entered the door. She was gorgeous, with a thin face combined with graceful curves that were neither small nor large. In fact, her measurements were simply the best to catch. She was also very well dressed, which made it easy to see that she did not live in the dry city. There was also a man following her. He was tall, muscular, and had a very relaxed look. This must be a guard or a companion for the young blonde. At that moment, Dillion whispered to Minos. Young master, these two are already in the 5th stage of cultivation, spiritual general. The young woman is at level 42, and the man must be at level 47. After hearing this, Minos thought to himself. As expected. After that, they introduced themselves. Nice to meet you. My name is Elon Nash, and this is my bodyguard, Edward. Said Elon with a smile. Nice to meet you, I'm Minos Stewart, and this is Butler Dillion. So, Miss Elon, I'm curious to know what a Stone Island merchant expects from my black plane. Minos spoke with an expressionless face. Elon then began to speak without hiding her intentions. Well, as a trader, I'm always looking for opportunities. The black plane seems to be an excellent chance for me. For the past few weeks, I have been doing business at the Brown Kingdom. When I was finally returning home, I stopped in the dry city to rest. However, despite always passing through this city when I come to the Brown Kingdom, this time I heard some interesting rumors about a new local sovereign. Of course, that kind of thing happens a lot when you travel as much as a trader, but knowing the news from where you are is very important in our business. But the story I heard was just too unbelievable. But if it were true, it would be something to turn the sky and the earth upside down. So, I decided to stay here for a few more days. And now that I know that the rumor is well founded, I intend to do business with your territory. Elon said calmly. I understand. But there are many problems for a big deal to be made for now. I estimate that it will take a few years before I can do big business with other regions. Minos spoke vaguely. After thinking for a while, Elon continued to speak. I understand that you are just getting started, and any business that is done for now would have to be something small. But I am willing to help you with these smaller things, even if I don't make a big profit, in the hope that we can form a bigger partnership in the future. And as a gesture of sincerity, I can invest 4 spiritual arrays focused on gathering spiritual energy and classified as grade 0.1, high level. After hearing this, both Dillion and Minos were impressed with how much this young woman was willing to invest in this relationship. To give you an idea, the spiritual arrays are subdivided into 4 degrees, and each degree was divided into low, medium, and high levels. The difference between these classifications was the power of the array. The array could be of any type, such as spiritual reunion, battle formations, defensive shields, etc. But the power of each array would be defined by the classification it was in. For example, a grade 0.1, high level, array was 50 times more powerful than a grade 0.1, low level, array. This meant that the grade 0.1, high level, spiritual meeting array would be able to create an area of spiritual concentration 50 times larger than the area of a grade 0.1, low level. As for the spiritual density that this array would provide in that area, it would depend on the spiritual concentration of the region where it would be, or on the quantity/quality of the spiritual crystals provided and on how well classified the array would be. A grade 0.4, high level, array would have an efficiency of 100%. It would either concentrate all the spiritual energy in the area or convert all the energy contained in the spiritual crystals supplied to the array into free energy within that area. The spiritual array of grade 0.1, high level, would have an efficiency of 20%. But the difference in price between each was colossal. For an array with a measly 20% efficiency, the cost would be about 15,000 low-grade spiritual crystals. And for an array of the highest quality, you would have to shell out 100,000 high-level spiritual crystals. For this reason, investing in a place that barely started to develop, for a raise of grade .1, high-level, was something very high by the standards of the northern region of the central continent. Minos then calmed down before speaking. Oh. It seems that Miss Elin is convinced that the Black Plane will be very successful. But I want to know exactly what you want to get. I don't want to sign a blank check, said Minos, with a serious look. Elin then responded quickly. As I said, I only want a place at the table when the Black Plane develops. I would be pleased if I were your only contact within the Stone Islands. That would be enough for me. You are talking about the Black Plane, but what about your side? Will you be able to handle the entire turnover of my region with your Stone Island? Don't get me wrong. I'm not looking down at you. I just don't know you. Minos spoke with doubt. He wanted to know who he was dealing with. He didn't want to receive small help now to have big problems in the future. Elin was not angry. She knew that this young man did not know her background, so she simply said, I understand your side. It is natural that you do not know who I am, considering your past. But I can assure you that when the Black Plane is a major influence, I will not be a hindrance to your relations with the Stone Island. In fact, if you look for the Nash family on Stone Island, you will find that it is one of the largest merchant families in our region. Okay. Thanks for the honesty, Miss Nash. I will think about your offer and give you a feedback in a week. I guess that's not much, right? Minos said as he looked into the young woman's eyes across the table. Okay, a week is not much. I'm staying at the Four Seasons Hotel. You can send someone to let me know when you're ready. After that, Elin and her guard left, leaving Minos and Dillion alone in the office. Soon after, Dillion spoke. If I'm not mistaken, the Nash family is really a big family on Stone Island. I once heard a rumor that they even had relations with an empire. Oh. So, it looks like there should be no problems. But just in case, research about it, Grandpa Dillion. We have to know if she is not a member with a lot of problems within her family. After all, an exclusive business relationship like the one Elin wanted was no different from a wedding. If one of the two sides had a problem, then it would affect both parties because when you marry, the other's problems become yours too. Thus, Minos wanted to know with whom he would be relating, avoiding possible problems. Thus, 2 days passed, and Minos Group was still researching Elin Nash's past. But today, Minos had a very important thing to do. He would move to level 10, the start of the transition stage. The young Stuart was very excited about this and had already chosen an attack technique that he would learn at this stage. It was a skill classified in Golden, with 10 phases, called Spatial Sword. It demanded that the user use a sword-like spiritual tool. When the technique was activated, the space around the user would be stopped for 1 second, leaving all objects and living beings trapped during that time, as long as no one exceeds the cultivation level of the user. If that happened, the technique would have a diminished effect on that individual. As for the space around the user that would be stopped, this would depend on the phase in which the technique would be. In the first phase, the space within a radius of up to 10 meters from the user would be influenced by the technique. In the following phases, this space would double at each stage, reaching up to just over 5 kilometers around the user when the technique reached maximum performance. With this technique, Minos would have a big advantage against those at the same level as him, and even if he faced someone stronger than him, there would still be a slowdown effect if the difference in strength was not too big. Chapter 13. Transition. You are listening at novelfull.audio. A few hours had passed since Minos had started to level up when a small cracking sound came from his body. It was very subtle, the kind that you certainly wouldn't hear if you weren't in a quiet environment. Crack. Shortly thereafter, Minos felt a sensation like a sweaty and sticky body suddenly started to repel sweat. But in his case, it was a gooey and dark substance. It looked like the slurry that comes out of the garbage, not only in appearance but also in smell. And despite the small amount, Minos still felt like throwing up just feeling it. He then ran to the big house inside the spatial kingdom to take a shower right away. He didn't even want to start training his first attack technique. With the current scent of his body, there would be no way for him to focus on any training. A few minutes passed, and Minos was clean and in another set of clothes. Wow, I didn't think the odor of the impurities in my body was so bad. Minos thought, as he still had a queasy expression on his face. As for what happened, well, that was the spiritual cleansing that the fleshy body would undergo each time a cultivator moves up the cultivation stage. This process served to remove toxic substances present in the body's cells. These substances came from food, residues of spiritual pills, medicines, and even the functionally normal of the body. This is because, under normal conditions, most foods and pills would have impurities, which would accumulate in the body over time, as well as bioaccumulation. As for medicines and body metabolism, these too could also generate toxins. The first, when in excess, could create a body reaction that would result in the release of these toxins. Second, the body had natural reactions that would generate these substances, such as aging itself. In fact, this transformation had as its main result the increase in the vitality of the cultivator, which is usually the main objective of many people. After all, who would not want to obtain a few more years in this world? Finally, Minos picked up a golden parchment as he stopped beside the large house and in front of the lake. He then began to learn the spatial sword technique. With a sword in my hand, the fate of millions can be reaped. Do you have numbers? It makes no difference. They will all freeze and then killed in less than 1 second. Minos began to think about the meaning present in the technique. After a few hours, he performed the movement for the 100th time. At that moment, he realized that a leaf that was falling stopped temporarily before continuing to fall. He learned the basics of the technique and was now in its first phase. In addition to reaching level 20, he would have to complete thousands of moves to reach the second stage. This is because, unlike the cultivation technique, that only needed to be activated to strengthen itself, while its dominance over it would increase. With other techniques, the cultivator would have to complete a given number of executions before changing the cultivation stage. It would not be enough to increase the energy in your body. You would have to have an equivalent understanding of your techniques. This was also one of the reasons for the speed of cultivation being slower in higher stages. In addition to devoting time to cultivating spiritual energy, cultivators would still have to train each of their techniques at an equivalent level. Minos then finished this training session and returned to his mansion. He had a great night's sleep after what he had just been through. Another 5 days have passed. Minos was now at level 11, and today he would give the answer to Elon Nash about his possible partnership. According to Dillion's team, there was nothing particularly problematic about Elon within the Nash family. In fact, the only relevant thing they found was that she had a black talent, 22 years old and level 42, as Dillion had said. Thus, Minos intended to form a partnership with Elon. After sending someone to inform Elon of his decision, just over an hour passed, and then a young blonde woman arrived at Minos' mansion, followed by her personal guard. "You can follow me, Miss Elon. The young master will already receive you," said Mia with a smile on her face. "Okay." Soon after the meeting began, they discussed some important details and then closed the deal. In it, Elon Nash would have to supply 4 spiritual arrays of grade .1, high level. Together with services to promote the products produced in the Black Plain within Stone Island and also facilitate the contact of professionals from the island with the region of Minos. On the side of Minos, he would have to market his products on Stone Island through Elon. Alone, she would be his exclusive reseller within that region. So it is agreed like this. Will Miss Elon still be in my town longer? Who knows, we might have dinner to celebrate this deal. Minos said with a smile on his face. I appreciate the kindness, but we can do this the next time I come. I've been here for a long time, and I have to give a return to my family. Elin spoke with a serious look on her face. Oh, all right, then. Stay for the next time. After that, the group said goodbye. Before leaving, Elin said that she would send the spiritual meeting arrays to the Black Plain as soon as she arrived at Stone Island. According to her, it should take between 2 and 3 weeks for this to be done. But for Minos, this time would already be excellent. He would not even think about having that amount of arrays in less than a year while cultivating the cultures in this land. And although the effect of the arrays at this level was not so great, considering the current spiritual density of the Black Plain, when he had enough spiritual stones, he could significantly improve this issue. However, even if the effect were not so great, for a city with no array and low spiritual density, the arrival of 4 of them would be crucial for the whole city. Meanwhile, in various parts of the city, a topic was being discussed fervently. In fact, it had been 2 weeks since the Black Plain cure rumor came out. In those days, most people in the dry city did not believe the rumor. But at this point, the situation was completely different. The 200 people who had been hired for agriculture had now spread the word to those closest to them that, in fact, it was now possible to farm on the Black Plain land. But not only that, in 2 weeks, the crops grew to the point of being seen by anyone who passed by the plantation field near the city. With that, the subject had spread with even more power than before. And many already said it was a miracle and the heavens had not forgotten them. He really did it. Ha ha ha, I can't wait for the number of farmers to increase. I will be the first in line, said a resident of the dry city while showing an exuberant smile. Humph, get out. I am the one in line. Some people around laughed at the two. Then someone said, you old people shouldn't be worried. Considering the size of the Black Plain, there will be a lot of demand for labor. After that, many nodded in agreement. Of course, with 200,000 square kilometers and a population of just 50,000, there would be no unemployment for the current citizens of the Black Plain. Not only that. My cousin works in the city guard, and he told me that Mr. Stewart wants to increase the strength of the city's forces. They must release the number of vacancies and remuneration in the next 6 months. There will also be places for our children, said someone else. This was something very relevant for people with blue talent in the city. They were usually ordinary cultivators who had no specializations. So, working as guards was generally a good option for most of them. The only problem was that the dry city did not have the resources to maintain a huge number of troops. Thus, the competition was great for each new vacancy that appeared in the guard of the city. Because of that, most had to be content with doing random services in the region to survive. It looks like this Minos Stewart is not that bad. That was the thought that many of them had. They were excited about the things that were slowly changing in their city. While the city was surrounded by arguments, 2 incredibly dazzling women were coming towards the Black Plain, from the south of that region, the Cromwell Kingdom. But they were just passing through this realm, as they came from an empire. Master, will we bring your son back from the Black Plain to the sect? The disciple asked her teacher. I'm not sure, Ruth. He's a lot like his father, so I don't know if he'll want to follow me. The other woman said. Despite being the oldest here, she still looked like a young adult in her early 20s. Chapter 14. Unwanted Meeting. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Another week passed after Elin Nash left the Black Plain, but nothing relevant happened meanwhile. Although this region needs many changes, there was no budget for this. Due to this limitation, Minos' plans were frozen. For example, he wanted to create his own spiritual academy for children in the city. He wanted to start recruiting students for the Black Plain Army, just as the Gill family did. Even if the average talent in this area were low for now, it wouldn't be like that after a few decades. That way, he would be laying the foundations for a great future at this time. This week, in addition to reaching level 13, Minas also passed a new technique classified in silver to Dillion. It was a specialized healing technique, called Radiant Healing, with 6 phases, which used beams of light to heal wounds. Depending on its stage, the user could range from healing non-lethal wounds in the first stage to saving lives, as long as the patient still had a breath, regardless of his condition. However, due to the talent of Dillion, he could never achieve the realization of this technique. But as far as he could go, he would still be able to recover severed limbs from his patients. Minas had not delivered this technique to the butler Dillion before, as he was still getting to know each technique, and Dillion still needed to adapt to the new technique he had received a few weeks ago. This is because for those who change techniques, they need an adaptation time until they get used to it. Minas also asked the butler Dillion to pass on the black grade techniques to the 30 guards in the Dry City. In fact, he will leave techniques of this sorting to all future members of the Black Plane Army in the library of the future headquarters. But for now, they could only pass it along to the guards. As for -10 personal guards, they had already started training these techniques. At the entrance to the Dry City, 2 young women were walking slowly on a large spiritual beast that looked like a tiger. One of them had black hair, a cute face, and sensual curves. The other one, who didn't look much older, had brown hair and a beautiful body that you would see in some mature women. Both were wearing robes with the same pattern. They looked like members of the same family or sect. As they walked towards the central part of the city, the 2 women were talking when the young woman with black hair spoke. "I never thought that there would be a place as poor in spiritual energy as this. Master, I'm sorry to ask, but did the young Minas lose his mind?" Perhaps after recovering, he had not been able to think clearly. "Don't be thinking about this bullshit, Ruth. He must have come here because it was the only place he thought he could go," said the older woman. After a while, they finally stopped in front of the only mansion in the city, that despite its size, looked as good as any decent place in this city. "Let's go in and see if we can talk to him," said the brown-haired woman as she entered the mansion. "Hi, my name is Mia. What can I help you with?" Mia came to them as soon as she saw these strange people entering this place. Tell Minas that his mother is here to see him." "His mother?" Mia said in shock. Although it was not so strange for a mother to appear like this, she would never think that this woman, who appeared to be younger than she, was the mother of Minas. "Ah. Okay, I'll let him know," she said after recovering from the shock as she headed for Minas's office. At the time, Minas, Dillion, and Pike were in the office talking about matters relating to the safety of the Dry City when Mia hurried through the door. "Young Master Stewart, a young woman, is here to see you. She says that she is your MO." But before she could finish, the 2 young women entered through the door of the room. When Minas and Dillion saw this, they soon recognized the brown-haired woman. This was Minas' mother, Maisie Coleman, who was at level 65, Spiritual Emperor. As for the other young woman, neither of them knew her, but Dillion noticed her level. She was at level 43. Dillion then broke the momentary silence and said, "Mrs. Maisie, is good to see you again." "Oh. Good to see you, too, Butler Dillion. What are you doing here?" Minas then asked coldly. In fact, he was not happy to have to receive his mother. After all, she never paid attention or acted as a mother to him when he needed to, so why should he have respect for her? Upon hearing this, the young woman with black hair then replied angrily. "How can you talk to your mother like that? Do you know how far she came just for you?" "I don't know, since I don't know anything about her either. But she might as well have stayed there," Minas replied sarcastically. Minas' mother then intervened. "Ruth, don't say anything. He has his reasons for saying that you shouldn't blame him. Minas, my son, today I came to look for you. I intend to take you to the Grey Cloud sect. And even if you only have a black talent, it is better to become an external elder of the sect than to be in this backward place. She spoke with a serious look on her face. After hearing what Maisie said, everyone in the room, except Ruth, had reactions against this idea. Pike and Mia, who were pleased with the current way things were developing for the Black Plane, suddenly heard something that made them sweat coldly. After all, even if the cure of the Black Plane was definitive, they didn't know that Minos was still a great ruler. He wanted to develop the region, admitted when he didn't know something, and made smart decisions. Thus, they did not want to lose such a leader. Meanwhile, Dillion was also opposed. He had already adopted the idea of developing the Black Plane slowly, and he was sure that Minos would achieve that. Furthermore, with the Spatial Kingdom, Minos did not need to go to the Grey Cloud sect, where he would only encounter a lot of obstacles in his path. It would be stupid to do that. For Minos, on the other hand, he only saw one person he had no respect for, asking him to give up his goals. After all, in the Grey Cloud sect, he would be plastered by the system, he would have a difficult time, and even when he reached the top, it would be by a random force that he has no goodwill. As for the Black Plane, despite not being his original home, it's a place that he would develop from the beginning, something entirely of his own. So, he already had a special cart for these lands. After a while of silence, Minos started to laugh. Ha 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 ha, I don't need your good intentions. I'm just fine where I am. Maybe you're the one who needs to come and ask for my help in the future. As soon as he said that, Minos left the office without waiting for an answer and was soon out of sight. He had gone to the Spatial Kingdom to cool his head. Meanwhile, Ruth was thinking in her head. What an ungrateful bastard. But from the things he said, then he can only be a lunatic to think that we would need him. Sigh. I'm sorry about that, Mrs. Maisie, but the young master is doing well. This is really the truth. I know you are concerned about his future, but the young master will be fine. Dillion said with an apologetic smile on his face. Okay, Dillion, I already expected him to refuse. But I still wanted to try, at least in the sect, I could protect him. I understand, but maybe the young master doesn't need to be protected in the end. Dillion said while he was holding his arms behind his back. And why do you say that? Asked Minos's mother with curiosity. Didn't you feel the young master's level? Maisie spoke without thinking. He must have been at level 13. When she finally remembered. That's right, but he woke up from his unconscious state just 1 month ago. When she heard that, Ruth jumped back and thought. How is this possible? With my silver talent, I took 3 months to reach the same level. Maisie then answered before leaving Minos's office. I will be here in the Dry City for 2 days, tell my son that. After leaving, Maisie and Ruth went to the Four Seasons Hotel, where they would stay. Ruth then asked and they were halfway to the hotel. Master, why don't we go back? I believe that he will not change his mind. I know that, but I want to look at his situation before we leave. Even if he doesn't change his mind, I want you to return here in a 1.5 years. I want you to check his strength at that time, and if he can maintain that good speed in cultivation, then I want you to take him to the competition that will take place in 18 months in the Cromwell Kingdom. That way, he will be able to understand the difference between heaven and earth. Even if he has a good cultivation speed, it doesn't mean that he will be the strongest. Only by fighting those of the same generation he will understand me and change his mind. Said Minos' mother confidently. But what if he refuses? Asked Ruth curiously. I don't think he will refuse, considering how much he looks like his father and the fact that he wants to earn his things with his own effort. So, you shouldn't have to worry about that. Thereafter, the two of them settled in the hotel to spend the next 2 days. Chapter 15. Spiritual Meeting Array. You are listening at NovelFull.audio. 10 days have passed since Minos's mother visited him. At this point, she was already gone back to the Flaming Empire, where her Grey Cloud sect was located. In those days that passed, Minos reached level 16 and had already trained his technique, Spatial Sword, thousands of times, and in a week or more, he would reach the conclusion of the first phase of the technique. He also had already separated a specialized defense technique for his advancement to spiritual beginner, which should also happen in the next 2 weeks. It was a technique called Indestructible Body, Golden Grade Classification, with 9 phases. When activated, it could render the user's body indestructible for 10 seconds for those who are up to 100% stronger than the user. This meant that if the user of the technique was someone at level 20, then he would have an indestructible body for 10 seconds, that not even someone at level 26 could hurt him within that time. But against someone above that level, the defense would be less and less. At the higher levels, this ability to defend against those at the higher level would decrease as the difference in energy gets bigger and bigger through the levels. And as for the characteristics of the technique that would improve through the phases, it would start with only the initial 10-second defense and go up to the 9th phase, which in addition to being able to use an impassable defense for that interval, would also allow the user to use their own body as a weapon. Finally, Dillion had also managed to advance to level 46 these days. After all, the butler still had a black talent, and there were no bottlenecks within the steps. And even if they were in a low-density region, he would still advance to at least level 49, as long as he had time. Of course, they would not wait that, when there were enough spiritual crystals, the cultivation speed of all minus subordinates would increase consistently. A few kilometers from the dry city, a merchant carriage with a large volume of items was approaching the region. In that carriage, there was a symbol of a silver ship. That was the symbol of the Nash family from Stone Island. Hey, big brother, what are we doing, going to the dry city? We usually don't come by when we are going to deliver resources to the Brown Kingdom. A muscular man asked. In fact, Miss Elin made an agreement with the new local sovereign of the Black Plain. We are going to leave these 4 spiritual meeting arrays here, before we go on, to continue our service in the Brown Kingdom. Replied an older man, who had a scar on his left eye. A while passed, and soon the carriage reached Dry City. Young Master Minus, the spiritual arrays that Miss Elin had promised have just arrived, Mia spoke after entering Minus's office. Oh. That was quick. Let's go get this, Grandpa Dillion. Minus said as he had an animated expression on his face. Soon after, the young man and the middle-aged man went to receive the arrays. There were 3 people in the delivery group. A young man who didn't look much older than Minus, a muscular adult man, and a middle-aged man. Hello, friends from the Dry City, I'm Sarek, and these are Firil and Rex Larson. Said the middle-aged man, who had a scar on his eye. Then the young man in the group stepped forward and began to speak. Nice to meet you, you can call me Rex. I'm here to inform you about some details about the function of these arrays. Thereafter, Minus chose 4 local guards to learn the basic details of the array's operation from the young array master. This was common in this world. Although the arrays work alone most of the time, there was a need to follow certain processes when manipulating it. This was a job that was usually done by array masters, like the young Rex, a beginner. But in the Dry City, there was no one like that. So, this young man came with the group to teach the basics. But it wasn't difficult. It was just something that most people didn't learn because they either didn't have crystals to buy an array or they had someone to do these services for them. After that, it didn't take long, and the arrays were installed in 4 points of the city. The arrays would cover just over a third of the city's area, taking in the entire central area, which was the region with the highest population density. From what the young Rex had reported, these arrays could improve the spiritual density of the affected region by 15% if it were supplied only with free spiritual energy from the region of the Black Plain, which was very poor at this time. However, if it's up to 10,000 low-grade spiritual crystals were supplied each month, then the improvement would be at least 50%. As for if they wanted more than that, they would have to buy a higher level array since these grade 1 high-level arrays only had an efficiency of 20%, which limited any further increase. And so, the group said goodbye, going to the east of the Black Plain, heading towards other regions of the Brown Kingdom. For now, we will not be able to supply these 4 spiritual arrays with crystals since it would cost 40,000 crystals per month, but we are doing just fine with a 15% of improvement," said the butler Dillion, as he held his hands behind his back. It should be at least 6 months before we can start supplying one of them monthly and 1 year for all 4, Minas said with a thoughtful countenance. Pike, who was also in the group at the moment, then said with a big smile on his face. It doesn't matter. Even if it were 2 years or more, it wouldn't make a difference for us. Having any improvement in the spiritual concentration of the region is already beyond our dreams." After that, other guards nodded their heads. With a 15% improvement in spiritual concentration, they would already be able to cultivate much faster. This was already very good for them who did not want to take chances in a stronger place. The night quickly fell, and the 4 arrays were already in full operation. That night, many people noticed a sudden increase in spiritual concentration in some parts of the city. Meanwhile, in several places in the city, people who were starting to cultivate realized that the time it took to gather spiritual energy around them was less. Why does it seem easier to gather spiritual energy? An adult man thought while he cultivated. Elsewhere in the central parts of the city, a small group of people was talking. "I'm saying, the spiritual density is higher. When I cultivated today, it took me 20 minutes less to gather the surrounding energy," said a young man with a euphoric expression on his face. "But that doesn't make sense. Why would spiritual concentration improve like that all of a sudden?" asked a middle-aged man in disbelief. In this world, feeling the surrounding energy was something that everyone could do, but those who were weaker needed to cultivate to realize that. However, when someone reached level 40, cultivators could use free energy in heaven and on earth, and so they could feel the differences in spiritual density even without cultivating. But there weren't many at that level within the dry city. As a result, a new rumor slowly began to spread throughout the city, saying that the spiritual energy was more concentrated than normal. And it didn't take long for many people to notice this change. They also realized that this was not happening across the city. It was something that was limited to the regions closest to the central part, which covered just over a third of the entire dry city. A few days passed in the Black Plain, while many people were cultivating even faster than normal. The central region was getting busier and busier. And some people were already struggling to get a place to live in that part of the city. Minas had also increased his cultivation these days, reaching level 18. He was almost reaching the spiritual beginner. Not only he was getting better, but the young secretary Mia had already risen to level 25 in the nearly 2 months that Minas had arrived in the dry city. She, like Minas' other subordinates, was also training black-grade techniques. As a result, her cultivation speed has grown considerably. In those days, the youths that Minas had brought into his forces also turned 10 and came to the mansion to receive their cultivation techniques. Both Lee and Allison received the same cultivation technique of black-grade that was being passed on among Minas subordinates and then began to cultivate. And as individuals with black talent, they also had a good cultivation speed, having already reached level 2. And at that point, the wheat, corn, and rice crops were almost ready to be harvested, which would allow some more of Minas' plans for the city to be put into practice. Chapter 16. Spiritual Beginner. You are listening at NovelFull.audio. With the harvest approaching and the beginning of the cultivation of more lands, Minas had already requested that another group, this time of 400 people, be organized to prepare and cultivate another 6 hectares, accounting for 9 hectares for the next harvest. Today, Minas was preparing to meet with a local merchant who could sell his products inside a market in the dry city. Minas was walking towards a busy street in the center of the city accompanied by 2 guards. This was where most stores that sold food were located. He then entered a place that was called the Central Market, a 3-story building. The area was quite large and had a good movement since this was one of the few places in the city where the population could find grains, cereals, fruits, and vegetables with spiritual energy. For example, the price of a kilo of rice, corn, and spiritual wheat was 4 low-grade crystals in that place. The exact price that Minos wanted to charge for his products. The difference is that, due to the water of the spatial kingdom, the grains and cereals that he would sell would be much richer in spiritual energy than those sold locally. "Hello, how can I help you?" A young woman, who was dressed in the uniform of the place, asked towards the group of Minos. "Hello, where can I find the manager? I have a business to do with him," replied Minos with a friendly smile on his face. "Oh. Mr. Somir is in his office. I will show you the way." Shortly after that, Minos met with Somir. He was a middle-aged man, fat and bald. He was well-dressed and looked very healthy. Apparently, he lived very well, even though he was in the dry city. "Welcome to the Central Market, young Master Stewart. How can I help someone as important as you?" The fat man said pleasantly. He had recognized the young man in front of him. That was why he was talking to him so softly. "Well, as you may know, I've been planting in the Black Plain for a few weeks now, and it's almost time to harvest. That's why I want a place that sells my products." Minos spoke sincerely. Somir quickly understood and asked a question shortly thereafter. "Can I know what the young master would be selling?" "The quantity too. 2.5 tons of wheat, 3.75 tons of corn, and 3.75 tons of rice, all rich in spiritual energy. I intend to sell them at a price equivalent to the products already sold at this store." "Oh. Then that's it. Well, as there isn't a lot, we can do business. If it was much more, as I still don't know the products, I couldn't go on with that," said the manager sincerely. After all, he was already reselling products from the Cromwell Kingdom, so he couldn't just throw away the investment he had already made in those products. Even more in something unknown. But due to the quantities that Somir heard from Minos, even if the product weren't good, he would still be able to sell it since the demand for these items was high and the quantity offered by this new local sovereign didn't even reach 2% of the total demand. So, Somir was confident in selling Minos grains and cereals. After closing the deal, they agreed that Minos men would take these negotiated resources to be sold at the central market as soon as the harvest was done. It was also agreed that there would be a 10% fee, which would be paid to the central market. After that, Minos returned to his daily activities at his mansion. A week had passed quickly, and Minos had already reached level 19 3 days ago, and today he planned to break up to level 20, spiritual beginner. He was in the spatial kingdom cultivating diligently, sitting, and meditating in front of the lake that was in this place. Minos then began to circulate the solar god breath technique, which had already reached the end of the second phase and was ready to move forward. Meanwhile, within the body of Minos, the spiritual energy was slowly reaching the limit of level 19. At that moment, Minos' soul's spirituality finally completed the transition to becoming something with form and visible within the young Stewart's consciousness. Before that, the soul would be just a nebulous cluster that couldn't be understood as something other than the body. It could be considered only a part of the individual's metabolism. But from the spiritual beginner stage, the soul would constantly increase its spirituality, reaching the level of solidifying and becoming something palpable at the level of a spiritual saint. Minos' body also received the traditional cleaning of impurities that was had at each stage. This time, the amount of toxins released from his body was about 4 times greater than the previous one. And as for the smell, Minos felt like something dead was living inside him. This advance had an even greater effect than the previous one. This time Minos' vitality increased by 100 years, reaching 250 years of life expectancy. The energy that Minos needed to go from level 19 to 20 was also 4 times greater than the amount he had previously needed when he went up from the first to the second stage. After taking a long shower to get the stink out of his body, Minos then started training his new technique, Indestructible Body. With an indestructible body, I will defend the world and crush my enemies. Minos began to understand the technique little by little when he finally activated it. If anyone looked, it would seem that nothing happened, but for Minos, it was as if his body was made of pure metal. He felt that even if someone with the same strength as he attacked him with a sword and he stood without defending himself, he would still not be hurt. However, he was still unable to use the technique to attack. This was something that would come only when he was much stronger. And he could only use this technique for 10 seconds, using 50% of his current spiritual energy. This technique also required that the technique be activated for a total of 50 hours to reach the peak of the first phase of the technique. It was no different from the spatial sword, which also required a minimum number of activations to move forward. After many hours training his techniques and cultivating, Minos left the spatial kingdom and decided to take a few hours to rest. Time passed, and finally was time for the harvest. For the first time in hundreds of thousands of years, such a thing has been done in this region. The initial 200 farmers were pleased with what they'd done, and today the fruits of their work have finally come. With the strength of these cultivators, all 3 hectares were quickly harvested, and the grain and cereal were prepared in a building next to the fields, which had been properly built at the request of the farmers. Several carriages were made, especially for the transportation of these items since none of them had spatial rings, and such rings didn't have such capacity. 2 days after the harvest, all the items were already in the central market and would start to be sold today. At the central market, a middle-aged woman, Dara, was going to buy the week's ingredients for her family. She was a housewife, married and with 2 children, and had to save every crystal that her family earned. I hope that the rice isn't of a poor quality today. Last week I had to throw half of what I bought in the trash. She thought discontentedly. Sometime later, she stopped in front of a stall, where there were the biggest grains of rice that she had ever seen. It also had a white color that almost glowed. Although Dara couldn't feel the free spiritual energy in heaven and on earth, she knew that these grains had an amount of spiritual energy that was, at least, greater than the other rice sold in this store. "Beov, young lady, can you separate 2 kilos of this rice for me?" She spoke to a uniformed girl, who was standing by the balcony. "Just a minute. Young lady, can you tell me where this rice came from?" Dara asked curiously. The young woman then responded quickly. "It came from here, in the region of the Black Plain. This is the spiritual rice grown by the new local sovereign." "Oh. Then that's it." She was shocked to learn that a culture planted here in these areas could yield such a quality. At Dara's house, it was time for lunch, and only she and her 2 children were at home. Dara had cooked the rice bought at the market earlier and wanted to know its taste and spirituality. It was not long before one of the boys, that had already started to cultivate, praising the food. "This rice is delicious, Mom." Soon afterward, he let out a cry of surprise. "Ah! What happened?" asked his mother. "I just advanced while eating this rice." Herod, Dara's eldest son, who was already at level 5, said in shock. After eating a portion of rice, he went straight up to level 6. While Dara's family was dazzled by the effects of the new spiritual rice sold at the central market, the same thing was happening in other families in the dry city. It didn't take long, and soon the rumor of spiritual rice that could spur advances after a few spoons spread throughout the city. Soon, people start looking for rice and other products planted in the Black Plain as if they were treasures. Chapter 17. The First Fight. You are listening at NovelFull.audio. For days passed, and the entire harvest had been sold. After the success of rice, many families sought to know what other crops had been planted in the Black Plain. This made the 10 tons of grains and cereal end up in the blink of an eye. This is because these items were so rich in spiritual energy that when someone from the first and second stages of cultivation ate a few spoons, they could achieve a breakthrough in their levels. And in these stages of cultivation, spiritual crystals couldn't be used to cultivate. But it was still possible to use the spiritual energy present in food. And even if the amount of energy in food was much less than that present in crystals, it was still something that could make a big difference. Thus, eating this type of energy-rich culture was something with very high demand, and when coupled with the low price of commercialization, then the products of the Black Plain went viral within the Dry City. With that, Minos now had 49,500 crystals in his hands. Of this amount, he would leave 32,000 to pay new farmers who would cultivate more 6 hectares in the next 2.3 months. He would start building the Black Plain Army headquarters from the remaining amount. With that, he could start recruiting in 3 months, when the new harvest has been done, and the Dry City had enough money for the new hires. He would also open a spiritual academy at that time. As for the purchase of spiritual pills that could help those with talent below the black rank, he would let these guards reach the peak of their stages first. That's because none of them was at level 39, which was a bottleneck hard to pass without outside help for individuals with blue talent. And not only were the city guards not at that level, not even Minos' personal guards reached that level, with the strongest of them being at level 38. In the Spatial Kingdom, things were very calm as expected. But there was something different today. Besides Minos, 3 other people were cultivating in front of the big house, near the lake. These 3 were Butler Dillion, Lee, and Allison. As to why they were here, well, that was because, for the Butler Dillion, he didn't have much work lately. This was because the city didn't have enough funds for the necessary changes. So, he could only concentrate on cultivating and getting stronger for now. And training in the Spatial Kingdom would considerably increase the speed of anyone in the north of the central continent. As for Lee and Allison, these 2 had a black talent and could advance quickly if they trained in a place with a high spiritual concentration, such as the Spatial Kingdom. Thus, Minos convinced these 2 families to let them go through Minos' special training. Of course, the young steward didn't elaborate on what would happen since it wasn't good for others to know. As for the 2 youths, Minos wanted them to get stronger quickly. So, he decided to invest in these 2 and let them live within the Spatial Kingdom for 1 year, which would be enough time for them to reach the spiritual beginner stage. After that, they could cultivate outside the Spatial Kingdom using spiritual crystals. Minos also promised the youths a silver grade technique so that they wouldn't tell anyone about the place where they would be during this period of time. Finally, he was now at level 21, but he had a problem. He had only cultivated and trained alone until now, so he didn't know how strong he would be in a real fight. With that, he wanted to start training with his guards. And considering the ability of Minos' physique, increased energy, coupled with golden grade techniques, he was confident that he wouldn't lose a fight against someone up to level 27 or 28. Although he wasn't sure if he would win, he assumed that he could have some challenge only from that level. Below that, he would certainly win, and there would be no point in it. So, Minos looked for Commander Pike to talk. After talking to Mia, Minos finally received Pike in his office. I heard from Mia that the young Master Steward was looking for me. How can I help you? I want to find someone to train with me. Ask some guards between levels 27 and 28 to come and see me in the courtyard behind the mansion. Said Minos excitedly. After hearing Minos' order, Pike was quite surprised and confused at the same time. First, because this young man didn't seem like the type to care about that kind of thing, and second, because what he was trying to do should be impractical for most people. After all, it wasn't common to struggle through the cultivation levels in these regions. Are you sure that the young master wants to face such a difference in levels? I don't want to look like I'm despising the young master, but that is a considerable difference. Said the commander while making a serious face. Minos replied calmly as he drank a cup of tea from the table. Don't worry. I don't think that fighting through the levels is trivial. But due to my high grade techniques, I will have no challenge if I fight against people weaker than that. Commander Pike then stopped to think for a while. There was really a big difference between the quality of the techniques of different degrees. And since Minus was distributing black-grade techniques as if it were tomatoes, that meant he was training techniques at an even higher level. After thinking this seriously, he came to the conclusion that there would be no problem. Okay, I'll get them together as soon as possible. After saying this, they said goodbye and returned to focus on some basic issues of the dry city. A few hours later, Minus was waiting for the group of soldiers with whom he would experience his first fight when Commander Pike finally arrived with a group of men. There were 10 guards, with 6 of them at level 27 and 4 at level 28. In fact, there were originally supposed to be 15 guards at that level, but since Minus learned of their numbers, 5 of them had advanced to level 29, while 3 of them at level 27 for level 28. Hello everyone, starting today, I hope that some of you can help me train daily. Of course, you still have your responsibilities, so I'm not going to occupy you at the same time. Minus then continued. Today, I want to fight someone at level 27 to see how I do. As for the others, you can watch if you want, or you can leave too. He then asked. Is anyone willing? And don't worry, you don't have to take it easy. You can fight normally. However, there wasn't much reaction of them. But suddenly, Minus thought of something interesting. How about this, we'll fight here for 3 weeks, I'll fight 2 different people a day, but someone who once fought with me has to wait for the others to fight too. In that period, whoever can beat me 3 times will win a silver-grade technique. After hearing this, the eyes of the 10 people almost popped out of their eye sockets. A silver-grade technique just to defeat someone who was 6 or 7 levels weaker than them. Some of them were already very excited about it while they were thinking. This is going to be a piece of cake, hee. Even Pike was impressed. In fact, he also wanted to participate in it, but unfortunately, there would be no way for such a thing to happen at his level. How unlucky. He thought. You can choose the order among you, but those at level 28 have to be last in the group, Minus said while holding his hands behind his back. He then thought to himself. You suppose it'll be very easy. Hee, I just want to see it. After a few minutes of discussing the order, one of them introduced himself to Minus. I would be the first to try, young Master Stewart. Said one of the level 27 guards. This guard was Jav. He was 29 years old, 1.8 meters tall, and with black hair. He had entered the guard 8 years ago when he reached level 20. Very well. Commander Pike will be the judge of this fight, and the fight will end when either of us is exhausted or when someone surrenders. Minus spoke quickly as he prepared himself. After that, everyone agreed with this and other rules. The fight was about to start. Are you ready? So, you can start now. Pike said excitedly. In fact, for simple people like him, watching such fights was a pleasure. It made his blood heat up. At that moment, Minus held a blind sword, and Jav did not use any weapon. This is because the attack technique of the guard in question did not require a weapon. At that point, Jav activated his technique with 60% of his power, which he thought would be necessary to win this fight. His technique was a black-grade one that he had received from Commander Pike through the butler Dillion. The name was Destroyer Fist, which, when activated, created an energy fist that would attack whatever was in the way. That should be enough, hee. Jav laughed in his mind. At the same time, while dodging the fist coming towards him, Minus activated the spatial sword, and everything within a radius of 10 meters stopped as if time had frozen, while Jav's speed was decreased by a small margin. That's because he was way above Minus level. Then everyone around, including Jav himself, realized something was wrong. And their expressions were slowly beginning to change. Chapter 18. Fights. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Minus carried out a smooth sword movement. It looked like he was cutting through the air. Soon after, a wave of energy was created from this movement. It looked like a blade of air, which, although small and somewhat transparent, was something that anyone could see. Swoosh. When Jav saw this, he felt a chill rise up his spine and immediately activated his defensive technique, Transcendent Shield, which created a barrier made of energy in front of him. Crack. When Minus' attack finally came into contact with Jav's defense, cracks immediately began to appear on the guard's shield and began to break. Ah! In a fraction of a second, Jav's defenses were completely broken, and he was sent flying from the spot while letting out a shocked scream. Minus had won. That is, of course, despite the difference in level, Minus had 5% more energy than someone at his level, but that was not responsible for this victory. No, the quality of the techniques was. Minus trained golden.grade techniques that were 200% efficient, while Jav used black.grade techniques, which allowed him to be only 70% efficient over his energy expenditure. This meant that even if Jav had twice as much energy as Minus when he activated his techniques, he couldn't even use all the power spent, while Minus managed to unleash an attack with the doubling of energy he had spent. The quick end of the fight surprised all the spectators around the courtyard. None of them could believe such a thing. Unbelievable. I never thought that someone could be so strong at level 21. Thought one of the level 28 guards. It's a really great achievement, but I believe that if Jav had attacked with everything from the beginning, without giving the young master a chance to attack, then the result could be different. Said another guard. Jav didn't attack with all his might at first, and that put him in a precarious situation. Said Pike with a thoughtful face. But even if he used everything he had, Pike thought Jav would still have a tough fight ahead of him, and he couldn't defend himself from an attack like the one he received. He had to dodge with all he had. Therefore, trying to defend would be too risky. After a few seconds, Jav recovered from the shock and the attack. He wasn't badly hurt. In fact, he only had a few scratches. That's because, although his shield had broken, he had still absorbed most of the damage. The young master won. Even if I hadn't made the mistake of underestimating him, it would still be a difficult game. Jav said with a disappointed look. Even if it was someone with better techniques and their leader, it was still very embarrassing for many people to lose to someone with lesser cultivation. It doesn't matter, but it's good for all of us to improve our behavior in the battle. Underestimating the enemy is often one of the biggest reasons for the death of cultivators. Said Pike while massaging his chin. Commander Pike is right. Anyway, that's it for today. Tomorrow we will have 2 other fights. Said Minus with a smile on his face. He was pleased with this start. After a while, they all dispersed. Minus returned to the spatial kingdom and concentrated on cultivating and training his techniques. He really liked to fight and wanted to do his best in his next fights. The day passed, and Minus was ready to face his first match of the day. Today's opponent is called Yell, 29 years old, level 27. He was not very tall, with 1.7 meters and a full beard. This time, there weren't many people in the courtyard. Aside from Minus and Yell, there were only 3 more people, with one of them being Commander Pike. The other guards, as much as they wanted to watch the fights to prepare themselves better, they still had their responsibilities in the city. Minus and Yell faced each other, while one held a sword and the other held a war hammer. Then, Pike finally started the fight. Immediately Minus activated his spatial sword because today, his opponent would already be waiting for it. That way, he didn't want to give him any chance to prepare himself. The space at a radius of 10 meters around Minus was then frozen, slightly slowing Yell's speed. Meanwhile, Yell activated his innate ability, Physical Strength, which increased both the defense and the user's attack. This ability was not a technique but a characteristic of Yell's warrior.grade physique. As is known, the physique in the spiritual world was classified in 5 degrees, being common, warrior, king, saint, and divine. And regardless of the degree of the physique, all people will have innate abilities. In the case of Minus, it was a skill that increased his energy. For Yell, one that increased his physical strength. As for the quality of the skill, depending on the physique's rating that the cultivator had. Swoosh. At the same time, Yell tried to deflect the blade of energy coming towards him. But it was too fast, and he was slowing down. Then Yell activated his defense technique, Stone Body, which could increase the body's hardness in many folds. Hong. An explosion sounded when the blade hit Yell's shoulder. But this time, Minus' opponent wasn't defeated in a single move. Yell had felt the blow, but he had both deflected part of the attack, and his defense had dissipated most of the damage. He only had discomfort in his shoulder and felt a little worn out from having almost consumed half of his energy just to defend himself. Ah, at least now I have my chance to attack. He must be almost out of energy. Yell thought as he regretted not being able to dodge the attack. Then, Yell activated his attack technique quickly, without leaving much room for Minus to counterattack. Hammer of Heaven. This was a technique that used a hammer to crush enemy defenses. It could also send a wave of energy when activated from a distance from the enemy. Whack. When Minus saw the surge of energy coming his way, he immediately burned half his energy and activated his own defense technique. Indestructible Body. No visual changes appeared, but Minus often felt stronger than usual. He was prepared to receive Yell's full blow to his chest while he was in a vulnerable position, ready to strike back. And since he was confident in his defense, he was already activating his attack technique simultaneously. He wanted to receive the enemy's attack and immediately end the fight. Puff. A hollow sound was heard. It was as if Yell's attack had completely dissipated when she touched Minus' body. At that moment, Yell's mouth opened in disbelief. He couldn't believe it. However, he didn't have much time to be surprised. In a fraction of milliseconds, a blade of air was almost hitting him. Swoosh. He didn't have time to activate his defensive technique, and soon a sound was heard. Hong. After that, Yell's body was thrown for 6 meters before finally falling to the ground. He was not unconscious, but he was extremely stunned. Minus won the fight. However, he was also completely exhausted. Despite being on his feet, if his opponent weren't exhausted too, then he would have no resistance. Fantastic, young Master Stuart won again. Pike thought as he analyzed what had happened. It seems that someone at level 27 cannot break the young master's defense, said one of the 2 guards who were watching the fight. It will be much more difficult than we thought to win that silver grade technique, the other guard commented. After that, Minus continued to fight each of level 27 guards for the next 3 days. In these struggles, only one surprise happened. One of the guards had a warrior grade physique, with an innate ability that increased his speed. This made it possible for him to fight Minus and get a victory. After that, Minus fought with the 4 guards, who were at level 28, in 2 more days. This time he had 2 draws and 2 defeats. But he wasn't discouraged. After these struggles, he understood his own strength and the difference between the levels. He also learned the importance that physique had in fights. An innate ability that can be used in battles can unbalance a fight in the blink of an eye. Anyway, after these 6 days of fighting, he would rest for a day and return to his fighting routine in the next week. Minus was in the Spatial Kingdom cultivating on a lakefront location. A few hundred meters away, it was also possible to see Dillion and the 2 youths, Lee and Allison. Dillion was training in his healing technique while the 2 youths cultivated. They were already at level 4 and were constantly improving. And for Minus, he was also currently at level 22. After a week of fighting and hard cultivation, he had made progress. With that increase in strength, the fights that would come next week would be even more favorable for him. He was confident that at least he would beat a level 27 opponents and those 2 level 28 opponents with whom he had drawn. As for the other 2, he still wasn't sure, but he wanted to reach a draw at least. Chapter 19. 1 year you are listening at novelfull.audio. 2 weeks passed, and Minus was now at level 23. In that time, he has fought with all 10 guards who were between levels 27 and 28 2 more times. From the matches, before he reached level 23, he beat everyone who was at level 27, 2 at level 28, drew with another, and lost to the last. By the next week, he was already at level 23, and although 2 of the guards had advanced to level 29, it didn't help them much. Minus just didn't win a game, which ended in a draw. The opponent in that match was the same one who had already beaten Minus twice. His name was Grym. He was 30 years old and level 29 when they fought the last time. He was a muscular, tall man. But what impressed Minus was the fact that this guard had a king-grade physique. This was surprising because, generally, you are not born with a physique with a rating higher than the person's talent. And since Grym had lived his entire life in the Dry City, it was unlikely that he would have improved his physique with external means. In the spiritual world, although it is not possible to increase a person's talent, they would still be able to advance through the bottlenecks to a certain extent, as long as that cultivator used special means to achieve this. And for the physique, a person could increase their rating only once during their life, but for that, special means would also be needed. However, there would be a limit. For example, for the physique, it was only possible to increase the classification by 1 degree. Only a mutant physique like Minus could continue to improve. So, it was unlikely that Grym was born with a warrior-grade physique and then evolved into a king. There were no resources in this region for that. But despite being a rare thing, it was not impossible for such a thing to happen. Anyway, such an asset enabled Grym to have a good advantage in the battles against Minus. He had an innate ability, mental chaos, which put the opponent in a state of temporary confusion. And since Minus had a much lower level, he was very vulnerable to this ability. However, after reaching level 23, Minus managed to avoid defeat using all his strength. Mia, call Commander Pike. Ask him to bring the guard Grym with him too. Minus spoke to Mia as she went to his office. Okay. A few hours later, the door to Minus's office opened, and 2 men entered the place. It was Pike and Grym. Young Master Steward, is there anything we can do for you? Asked Pike with a curious face. In fact, I decided to reward the guard Grym for his performance over the past few weeks. Although he did not win the 3 games that I had conditioned to receive the silver-grade technique, he has not lost yet. Minus then looked at Grym and said. That's why I decided to award you with a silver-grade technique. He then took a silver scroll from his spatial ring and tossed it to Grym. Grym was completely shocked when he heard and saw this. He wouldn't even dream of having such a thing. Hell, even black-grade techniques were too much for him. Meanwhile, Commander Pike's mouth was wide open. He also had an ambiguous feeling of happiness and envy at the same time. After all, this was his biggest dream, after Minus had let them learn black-grade techniques. The technique that Minus gave to Grym was called Daydream. It placed the target in a hallucination, which would disorient him for 10 seconds, and if used during the day, it would have a double effect. Thank you very much, young Master Minus. I will train even harder starting today so as not to disappoint you. Said Grym, full of conviction. After that, Guard Grym returned to his services while Minus and Pike discussed matters relating to the administration of the Dry City. Time passed quickly, and it was time for the second harvest. A month and a half passed in the blink of an eye, and Minus was now at level 27. Within the Spatial Kingdom, the youths, Lee and Allison, also increased their strength during this period and were now at level 8. According to Butler Dillion, these 2 should reach the transition stage in another month. But for Butler Dillion, he failed to make any progress. It took much longer for someone at the general spiritual stage to make progress than at the lower levels. To get an idea, while someone with high talent and in a region of high concentration, it could go from level 0 to 10 in 2 or 3 months. And for the same cultivator to go from level 40 to 41, it could take 5 months. It wasn't easy. And in addition to gathering an increasing amount of energy, they still needed to have an equivalent domain in each of their techniques. Otherwise, it would be very harmful to continue to move forward in the future. And as in higher stages, a higher number of techniques were trained. This really increased the progression time a lot. Anyway, today, Minos and the butler Dillion left the spatial kingdom to solve the future issues of the Black Plane, since a good amount of crystals would arrive for them soon. At this moment, Minos and Dillion were talking in the office when the door quickly opened, and Secretary Mia came through. "Young master, the manager Somir is here to see you," Mia said after entering Minos's office. "Hehe, I think this guy came to negotiate. Last time we gave him a good profit," Dillion said as he drank a cup of tea. Send him in, Mia." After a few seconds, the manager of the central market came through the door of Minos's office. He looked very well, but he had a serious expression on his face. In fact, in the last harvest, Minos products sold so well that he was concerned that the young steward would not do more business with him due to the 10% fee he had charged. That is why he had come here after discovering that the current harvest was about to be done. "Nice to see you, Mr. Somir," Minos said with a smile on his face. "It is good to see you too, young master Minos. Today I came here to renegotiate the Central Market Commission for the next harvest. Last time I charged a higher price because I didn't know the product and it was a small quantity. But this time, I want to make the best price possible for the young master." Minos then asked with an expressionless face. "Oh. And how much are we talking about?" "I thought of a rate of 3% of what is sold. It will be little for the central market in the first months of business, but over time we will have a good advantage," Somir spoke honestly. I can accept that fee, but we can renegotiate this in the future. How about we form a 5-year partnership?" Minos asked. That rate was good, but when trading yielded very high amounts, the central market would receive a considerable share. Therefore, Minos would renegotiate this contract in the future. "It works, too," Somir replied with relief. This was already expected, so he saw no problem with that. The main thing is that he would continue to sell Minos items. A year quickly passed. During that period, the dry city grew steadily and now had more than 40,000 inhabitants. This is because part of the residents of the Black Plane had migrated to this city, which had been developing a lot in the last months. Many changes have occurred in the past period. For example, about 100 hectares, now planted in various crops, employed more than 10,000 people in the city. The numbers of the army of the Black Plane also rose sharply and were now just over 600 members. As for the city, the most significant change was the use of spiritual stones in the 4 matrices. Now, Minos was supplying crystals to all of them every month. This resulted in yet another increase in spiritual density in the central parts of the city, which had made the population even happier. After all, with an increase in spiritual concentration, the cultivation speed of the entire population was increasing. BVEC regarding Minos, he was now at level 33, while Dillion was at 47. As for the youths, Lee and Allison, they were already in the spiritual beginner stage. Minos had also undergone the first physique mutation, going from the common grade to the warrior grade. As a result, the increase in spiritual energy that the Minos physique's innate ability provided went from 5% to 10%. During this period, there was also a good development in the strength of army soldiers, and many of them were already at their limit, level 39. Because of this, the need for spiritual pills was urgent. Minos then decided that since Elon had not returned during this period, he himself would go out towards Stone Island to do business. He also intended to start selling his items in that region, which would also be resolved on this trip. After a big meeting with the most important people in the government, it was decided that Dillion would stay to take care of the city in the absence of Minos. Meanwhile, now Cape Pike and 10 other soldiers of the same rank would accompany the young Stuart during the trip. This was a trip that could take from weeks to a few months, and as they had to go through several unknown regions, there was a need for such strength. Despite not being strong, the Black Plain still had some regions with the presence of low-level spiritual beasts. This was also a source of income in the region before Minos arrived. There could be other problems as well, so the group was made in the best possible way. Except for Minos, everyone was at level 39.